Hey there, I'm Mark from Spectrum Pulse, and today's a big one, the newest project from Father John Misty Mahashmashana. I know that it's just pure coincidence, but I can't help but chuckle that in this week, where arguably my most anticipated album was from Father John Misty, well, Kendrick Lamar stepped on him yet again with GNX. Go back and track through their album release years, it's kind of uncanny how often it's happened. But of all the buzz around this project, it was very encouraging. Reportedly his best since Pure Comedy, and given how underwhelmed I was by Chloe in the Next 20th Century in 2022, I really wanted this to kick all amounts of ass this late in 2024. And you know, let's make it clear. I think it does. This is an excellent album, lush, opulent, witty, occasionally heartbreaking. But at this point, I think I'm realizing what I find most compelling from Josh Tillman are less of the grand conceptual flourishes and the commentary on society, and more how the man behind it all buckles beneath such weighty revelations. Is the big reason I like God's Favorite Customer a little bit more than Pure Comedy. Even if I think the latter has grander swings and a stronger ending, the former has that gripping personal fear and desperation that I find really compelling. Now, for what it's worth, this project seems to be trying to strike the balance between the two lanes, coax through a glamour of celebrity trappings that feel all the more tortuous for everyone suffering around and inside it, amplified by the production that is sweltering through old Hollywood opulence in the strings, a lot of 70s swaggering sleaze and the nastier guitars and bass lines and those wailing saxophones, and a runtime to accommodate a lot of grand instrumental flourishes and a desperate quasi-ironic decadence that's crumbling on every side. Now, for just 8 songs, the album feels enormous and expensive, but rarely bloated. I mean, once you make Pure Comedy, nothing ever quite matches that. Although in recent years, with Drew Erickson taking more of a lead on the production, the reverb can feel a little bit overused, which can have Josh Tillman's voice feeling a little bit discombobulated, almost fighting for air against the maximalist aesthetic. And yeah, that kind of fits thematically, and we'll get to that, but it doesn't always leverage his charisma and presence as effectively. And yet, this project might also contain some of Josh Tillman's most daring musical experiments, nearly all of which stick the landing. She cleans up his note-perfect early 70s boogie trash with a killer sinuous bass line and filthy sax. I Guess Time Makes Fools of Us All sounds like a vintage country politan jam, fused with early progressive rock, complete with saloon pianos, psychedelic synthesizers, a drum solo, and a note-perfect sax solo. But what might be most daring is Screamland, the best album closer positioned as album centerpiece I have heard in years, with BJ Burton handling these blown out walls of distortion on this hook that sound like borderline noise rock, the sort of bricked out holler that kind of nearly lost me on the production until I fully took in the melodic dynamic build that actually stuck the landing. If I give this project an edge over Pure Comedy, it's how the arrangements have so much unique, glorious character, like how the strings blossom on the title track, especially after the second verse, or the dramatic punctuation on Josh Tillman in The Accidental Dose, or the pedal steel and flute touches on Mental Health that sounds so beautiful, and that open also into that glorious saxophone. But alright, let's explore what the production is trying to do, and that takes us straight into the lyrics and themes. And let's start off with the opening title track. Now, the title loosely translated from Hindu as the Great Cremation, a process that would break reincarnation across a sprawling, largely abstract song that juxtaposes the sacred but ineffable feminine against compromised and desperate masculinity that stares in the face of belief but sees nothing but endings that defy any religious structure, and also then seems to revel in the absurdly impressive self-delusion humans have embraced anyway. Now, that sort of theme is not that surprising from Father John Misty at all. I know it's a mouthful, but this borderline nihilism in the face of a spiraling, futile world, it underscores a lot of his catalog, especially Pure Comedy. But the framing is a little bit different this time around. Pure Comedy was layered and lyrical and a little sardonic in its knowing and self-aware nods to the camera. The punchlines were more telegraphed, and there was always an air that he was canny enough to live around it or slightly above it. An ironic self-importance where the line of that irony constantly blurred. Now, Mahashmashana, it dispenses with that illusion sharply. He's in the shit. Tillman's writing is often most compelling when someone grappling with that illusion of full control. And most hilarious and moving, bucking at the control that he thinks he has, both in the micro and macro. In the former, okay, yeah, it can feel a little celebrity culture Californicated. That can kind of get edgy until you get at the cruel jokes underneath it. She Cleans Up reflects the sleazy push and pull of women fighting sexist exploitation, and the men who lash out violently when challenged or canceled or fighting against their own worst impulses, with the sick punchline being, so long as guys refuse to claim any agency, it is good women are always there to clean up, where the production reflects exactly the sort of era of men who would never get that cutting insight, both past and now, where the thicker reverb seems to accentuate the echo of his own voice in his own head. Mental Health is another great example. A lot of this album seems to feel restrained, bucking at urges to get wilder and nastier, a bit more debauched, perhaps closer to what Josh Tillman was making a decade ago. And this song wants to needle how the term mental health becomes both online self-policing panopticon and brand image. So much controlled opposition in preserving mental health or anything really changing or challenging. That's some absolutely edgy shit. It is insightful commentary on commodification, but later on the album's Being You, a self-described dissociative moment that shows how such being a hot mess can also be viciously packaged, dissected, commodified, just the Gen Z version. To quote very telling lines in the album closer, the girls look good in riches, finer still in rags, neon ships stretch across me, a lecherous old windbag. Cause that's the larger truth now, isn't it? The alternate title of this album is Time Can't Touch Me, the closing line of this project. But even as Tillman croons those words beautifully, it's obvious bullshit. He knows that. With the penultimate song, I Guess Time Makes Fools of Us All, running through so many men of authority seeing their rule, their insight, their bad jokes, their false platforms, their bloated, feckless ennui, even their struggles and hopes for love running into a future that has brought better men low. Or at the very least, you can't control the future, even as much as you might desperately want to. Because at the end of the day, how much of this is just flailing projection, pure ego? But like with pure comedy, Tillman is smart enough to break the ego enough to see the other side. Josh Tillman in The Accidental Dose, another excellent example. One of those semi-autobiographical cuts where at least some of this feels excruciatingly true. For a long time, my favorite song of his has been The Night Josh Tillman Came to Our Apartment. That's a compliment from me. So he drops acid, a girl puts on Van Morrison's Astral Weeks, decidedly not a jazz album despite her claims, as she attempts to convince two other people at this party that they're both tacit fascists despite her own privilege, which is kind of darkly hilarious given that her motive is never quite ascribed because she seems more dilettante than adversarial. Interesting. Where for Tillman, his ego is just burned away in the hallucinations and a plea he wants someone to play with, left a little shattered and childlike in its wake. He's looking for someone to be vulnerable with before it all closes in, as time will do. And that takes us to Screamland, the best song on this album and potentially one of the best songs of Josh Tillman's career, where he sees that desperate, reckless optimism that can be just as destructive to other people. Sometimes it's short-sighted, outcast, but who will provide him community in all of his rawest moments, a space to be truly vulnerable. It is all coaxed through some religious imagery, and if you know anything about Tillman's evangelical upbringing, or even the themes of this album, that's the sort of thing he views with the same distrust of its ego and hubris and disconnect from its own foundational text. But in a church for those with nothing, even rejected by God, something to believe in. And there is a yearning magic in that. To quote another songwriter who kept finding a lot of resonance for me this year, all my friends are finding new beliefs. And then the song abruptly cuts to black, leaving it all the more uncertain in that space. I mean, it's not surprising. Endings are like that. But in short, yeah, damn near magnificent. The difference from feeling above the storm to being capsized within it, which leads to a messier emotionality, but the writing is just as effective. I would struggle to call it his best. I Love You, Honey Bear is one of the best albums of the 2010s. I would argue at this point it's an independent classic. But this is the first album since where the grandeur has felt holistically realized in writing, delivery, composition, and production. It is glorious across past, present, and future. In other words, yeah, one of the best of 2024. I understand if GNX got more attention, but if you're looking for an ambitious tour de force right after it, Father John Misty delivered again. You'll want to hear this one. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you want to see more, please be sure to like, share, drop comments, subscribe. I'm curious if Father John Misty fans have fallen on this album. I actually went back and checked. A lot of my Father John Misty reviews have done perplexingly well, so I have to hope this one does well. I'm curious where folks fall on, especially as I think this one can be a little bit more oblique in some of its imagery. I'm curious to hear some of y'all opinions. Beyond that, though, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. And if y'all want to get involved and help and support the channel, or, you know what, get albums on my schedule one last week to do so before the end of the year, or hell, just want to yell at me on my Discord, YouTube memberships in certain tiers, and my Patreon are available. Once again, don't feel obligated. Tough times, I understand, but the option's available. Till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.